All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep, way back in time to Exodus chapter 19, from the King James Version of the Bible. And we're looking at the Israelites, right, just arrived at Mount Sinai after escaping Egypt. Huge moment for them, about to enter this, well, life-altering covenant with God. So we're going to be talking about the imagery, the rules, and what it all meant for those folks standing at the foot of the mountain. And joining us to break it all down is, well, you know them, expert speaker.
Always a pleasure.
So imagine this, right? It's the third month after fleeing Egypt. The Israelites are in the wilderness of Sinai, and they're facing this massive, imposing mountain. What would it have been like for them arriving there after everything they had gone through?
Well, you got to think about the awe, right? But also maybe some apprehension. I mean, these are people who have seen God's power firsthand, right? The plagues, the parting of the Red Sea. And now here they are at the foot of this, well, a mountain that seems to just pierce the sky, a physical manifestation of God's presence. Pretty powerful symbol, especially for people escaping generations of slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's from this mountain that God speaks to Moses, right? Offering them, the Israelites, a covenant, reminds them of their miraculous escape from Egypt, and then lays out the terms: obey, keep my covenant, and you will be my treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. This whole idea of a covenant, it's a big deal, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The bedrock of ancient societies. It was how they, established relationships and obligations between, well, individuals, tribes, even nations. Not just casual agreements either. We're talking solemn oaths, often, with rituals and sacrifices involved, and some serious consequences if you broke them.
So God's basically proposing this formal binding relationship with the Israelites. And their response, it's striking, right? All that the Lord hath spoken, we will do.
I mean, that's a pretty enthusiastic yes to what sounds like a pretty demanding agreement, right? So what do you make of their response? Just caught up in the moment or something more?
Well, there's definitely that overwhelming awe and gratitude. They've just experienced, incredible miracles, seeing God's power free them from slavery.
Right, right.
So strong element of faith there for sure. Willingness to trust this God who, well, he's proven himself faithful. But also think about their newfound freedom. After generations of oppression, they finally have control of their destiny. This covenant is not just a relationship with God. It's their identity as a people, a nation set apart.
Okay, yeah.
Gives them purpose, a sense of belonging. So maybe that contributed to their wholehearted acceptance.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. Their eagerness to enter the covenant, maybe it's a declaration of independence as much as an act of faith.
Yeah.
But accepting it, well, it's not without conditions. God lays out some very specific instructions for how they're supposed to prepare themselves for his appearance. Big emphasis on sanctification, right? Washing clothes, setting boundaries around the mountain. Even the priests who usually interact with the divine, they're told to sanctify themselves. So what's the meaning behind all these rituals and restrictions?
Well, it highlights the concept of holiness, which is, well, really central to this whole encounter. For the Israelites, holiness was about separation, purity, recognizing the vast difference between humanity and the divine. So these rituals are about acknowledging that difference, preparing themselves both physically and spiritually to stand before God.
Like they're being reminded that approaching the divine is not something to be taken lightly. Preparation, reverence, recognition of their own limitations, right? And this sense of, well, maybe anticipation, a bit of trepidation, it builds as God descends onto Mount Sinai. It's an incredibly powerful scene. Thunder, lightning, thick cloud engulfing the mountain, a trumpet blast so loud that the people are trembling. What does all this dramatic imagery tell us about how they understood God's power?
It's meant to be overwhelming, visceral. Inspire both awe and fear. They're seeing the raw power of nature unleashed. Mountains smoking, shaking. It's a clear message. This God, you got to respect him, maybe even fear him?
It's hard to even imagine, right,
Yeah.
being there for something like that. You're right, it really emphasizes that power difference between God and humanity. And yet, in the midst of all this chaos and fear, God calls Moses up the mountain, but warns everyone else to stay back, lest they perish trying to see God's full glory. Even the priests, or usually the intermediaries, they need to be extra cautious. So what do you think this contrast between Moses' access and everyone else being excluded, what does that tell us? Like how they understood, divine authority, holiness.
It reinforces that hierarchy, yeah. Both in terms of their relationship with God and within their own society. Moses, their leader, he's got that special connection, allowed to approach, to hear God's voice directly, but even he does so with, caution, reverence.
Hmm.
The people, though, they're still being prepared. Their fear, the need for rituals, it all says they're not ready for the full weight of God's presence.
Mm.
Like they're being told, you're on this journey towards greater understanding, holiness, but you're not quite there yet. And this journey takes a very specific turn, right? With the next major event, the giving of the Ten Commandments. These fundamental rules, they've shaped, well, not just religious traditions, but legal and ethical systems, I mean, for centuries.
Yeah.
So for those who might just think Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal, can you give us the bigger picture? What kind of society are they trying to create here? You hit it. They're not just a random list of rules. They're the foundation, a moral and social order. And like you said, two key dimensions, humanity and God, and then relationships between people. So, first few commandments, it's all about honoring God, right? Acknowledging his authority, no idolatry. But then you get to honoring your parents, no murder, no stealing, not lying in court, all designed to promote justice, harmony, accountability within the community.
It's interesting to think about them, given thousands of years ago. But in today's world, right, so much has changed. But respecting others, honesty, justice, it still resonates. But how did the Israelites themselves react to this massive download of divine law? They said yes to the covenant, but rules, I mean, no one's ever excited about all the rules, are they?
Well, we have to imagine overwhelming, right? They just saw this incredible display of God's power. They're probably still shaking, and then bam, a whole set of rules to govern their lives.
Makes you wonder if maybe some second thoughts started creeping in, right?
Definitely a shift in their attitude, yeah, as things unfold. They go from, enthusiastic about the covenant and principle to more cautious, maybe even fearful about actually living it out.
And that leads to, well, a pretty big moment. They feel the weight of these commandments, maybe realize what they've actually agreed to, and they ask Moses to be their intermediary. They say, "Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die." What's going on here? Are they backing out?
It is fascinating, isn't it? Their perception of God, their relationship with him, it's transformed. They experience that power firsthand, the smoke, the thunder, the earth shaking, terrifying.
Yeah.
And now they realize direct communication, it might be too much, too intense, overwhelming.
So they're basically saying, we want the rules,
Yeah,
but maybe from a safe distance.
exactly. Still in the covenant, but they need a buffer, someone
Yeah.
to mediate. And that's Moses, right? He's the bridge between the divine and the human. He'll relay the laws, the instructions, make the divine accessible.
Which makes me wonder, how do we approach these ancient texts today, these divine laws, in a way that's meaningful for our own lives? Big question, some to think about, definitely. But for now, we've seen the Israelites go from gung-ho about the covenant to a more, well, cautious approach, realizing the power of the God they've chosen. And they're starting to establish a system, right, for interacting with the divine, relying on Moses to handle it. But the story's not over yet. Stick with us as we keep going in Exodus 19 and see what happens when this idea of holiness, it takes, physical form. All right, welcome back to our Exodus 19 deep dive. We've seen the Israelites arrive at Sinai, God's incredible descent, those 10 commandments, and, they even asked for Moses to step in, right? Because a direct encounter with God is too much for him. But now, amidst all this revelation and covenant making, there's another element, this concept of holiness and the need for a space, a physical space to embody that. Can you help us unpack this? What does holiness actually mean for them, and how does it relate to their relationship with God?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's woven through the whole chapter, this idea. For the Israelites, it's about recognizing that difference, the profound difference between human and divine. It's about purity, separation, approaching God with, the utmost reverence and respect. Think back to those rituals, right? Washing their clothes, the boundaries around the mountain. Those are all expressions of this holiness, ways to prepare themselves physically and spiritually to, be before God.
So they're creating this distinction between the sacred and the everyday, recognizing that interacting with God, it requires something more, right? Intentionality. And this leads to the tabernacle, doesn't it? That portable sanctuary where God's presence would dwell among them.
Exactly, a physical representation of holiness, a sacred space set apart from the ordinary world where they could offer sacrifices, seek guidance, experience God's presence tangibly.
And there's so much detail, right? About the
Yeah.
design, the construction of the tabernacle, instructions for every element, the materials, the arrangement of everything. Why is it so important to get all those details right? What's the significance?
It highlights how precise God's instructions are, how intentional. This isn't just some random building project. It's a blueprint for creating a space that reflects the divine order. Every detail, the gold, the wood, the curtains, the ark, it all has meaning, symbolic meaning.
So it's not about a beautiful structure. It's about following a divine blueprint, participating in the creation of a space that's worthy of God's presence.
You got it. They're demonstrating their obedience, their commitment to the covenant, their understanding of holiness through this meticulous work. It's like they're building a palace for God, a dwelling place fit for a king.
And it also marks a transition, doesn't it, in their journey? They've gone from slaves to wanderers, and now they have a portable homeland, a place to connect with God wherever they go.
It's a powerful symbol of their identity as God's chosen people, a reminder of their history, their covenant, that unique relationship with the divine, and a source of comfort, Stability as they continue this journey.
We've covered a lot of ground today in Exodus 19. The arrival at Sinai, that awe-inspiring descent of God, the Ten Commandments, their realization that they need Moses to intervene, and then the tabernacle, this physical embodiment of holiness. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you said about interpreting these ancient texts for today. What are some takeaways from Exodus 19 that you think resonate with us, regardless of our personal beliefs?
For me, it's the power of covenants. This idea that relationships, whether with a higher power or each other, they're built on agreements, on commitments to, shared values, responsibilities. It's also about recognizing something bigger than ourselves, something that inspires that awe, that reverence. Maybe we call it holiness, maybe something else, but it's there. And maybe it's also understanding that approaching the divine, however we understand that, it requires something from us. Preparation, humility, a willingness to step outside our comfort zones.
It's a journey, like you said. And Exodus 19, with all the drama, the awe, the teachings, it gets us a glimpse into that. Reminds us about faith, obedience, and that search for meaning, connection in a world that can feel pretty chaotic sometimes. So as you go about your day, think about those covenants that shape your life, the values that guide you, the ways you seek meaning, connection in your own journey. What does holiness mean to you? How do you create space for those things that inspire you, that fill you with awe? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Exodus 19. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those moments of wonder, those things that make life so rich and meaningful.